SpiritLife!
Parents, be advised that this is part 2 of an interview containing a mature topic. Kids, get permission from your parents before watching. This is Bruce on SpiritLife. I'm going to be talking today about human trafficking and sex slavery. To help me do that, I have Benji Nolot, who is an expert in the field of modern-day abolition, and he's the producer of an incredible documentary called Nefarious. He's also the founder of Exodus Cry, which is committed to the abolition of slaves. Thank you so much, Benji, for coming out and talking to me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
What percentage of people that are watching this video in America have some sort of human trafficking going on near them?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of too many places that are exempt from human trafficking.
Wow.
As I mentioned before, this is a supply and demand issue. And so what we're seeing in our world today is really the hypersexualization of a generation. It's created a toxic environment that we grow up into that socializes our boys to become sexual consumers or sexual buyers, and socializes our girls to become sexually objectified or to become sold for sex. And so with the grooming mechanisms of our culture, where there's a bombardment of highly toxic sexual imagery coming through pornography, coming through advertising, coming through all forms of media, it is grooming, is cultivating this insatiable demand. And so at some point, these guys, you know, are going to want to take that next step into living out the fantasy that they've been cultivating for all these years. So really what it boils down to is wherever there's a demand, you're going to find a supply, because there's always going to be some, you know, form of organized crime, even if it's just a street level criminal who's willing to capitalize financially on the back of somebody else, exploiting somebody else. And so when you think about, well, you know, where are the places that there isn't a demand? I mean, there's really not too many. We're seeing trafficking cases come out in some of the most rural regions of our nation. And so I think that most people would have to begin to confront the reality that, you know, it's a very strong likelihood that human trafficking, sexual slavery is happening right here in my own backyard. I'll just give you one quick story on that. I'm living in Kansas City currently, and you know, people think the Bible Belt, you know, Midwest, you know, God country, you know, and but you know, there was I mean, there have been a number of trafficking cases right in Kansas City. One of them where there were these string of sex shops where people can go to buy pornography and things like that, and they had a basement cellar type area. Well, this stepfather was taking his 14-year-old stepdaughter to these places and prostituting her out to up to 30 men at a time. That was right in Kansas City. And so we drive down the highway and we see adult superstore and DVD, you know, porn DVDs for sale and all these kind of things. But we're not thinking about the other type of dark, insidious, heinous things that are happening in these environments. And, you know, for me, being in Kansas City in the Bible Belt, you just wouldn't think. But the fact is that with the internet today, and with the mass exposure to media, there's a demand that is being groomed throughout this planet, throughout this nation, and therefore there's a supply that's happening because of it.
So what degree is a person, let's say right here in the States, who looks at internet pornography, how is that person sewing into the human trafficking industry?
Yeah, what we have to think of when we think about the issue of sex trafficking, of course, is the supply and demand factor. So the important thing to understand about that is this, that as people find out about human trafficking, as they read some stories, they see a news story, they watch a documentary, whatever it might be, there's a feeling of, oh my God, this is so awful. What can I do? How can I bring an end to this? And so the fact is that we could actually end this today if men simply stopped buying women and children for sex. We could end this today if men stopped buying women and children for sex. And so that's really the core issue of how do we end this. It's really on the demand side of the equation. So to answer your question more directly, when you think about pornography and what role pornography has in this, I think pornography is fueling the demand. And the way we have to think about even the issue of being a John, you know, a guy that would buy somebody for sex, whatever, is there's a spectrum of what I call sex buyers. And it's not just the guys that are going into red light districts or calling up some escort agency. When a guy, you know, pays to consume pornography on the internet, he has become a sex buyer. He is purchasing the consumption of somebody else's sexuality. So he has already entered into that equation. So when we talk about sex buyers, we're talking about a far bigger and more pervasive phenomenon than just the guy, you know, flying to Thailand. It is the guy sitting behind his computer, paying to consume these images, that's feeding and fueling the entire sex trafficking industry.
When you expand the reality to that level, it's hard to even pinpoint how many Johns are out there per se.
Right. We have raised up a generation of sex buyers.
So Benji, how many perpetrators are there out there?
Well, first of all, I don't think that there's too many people that would classify themselves as being a perpetrator, regardless of how far they've gone. I mean, one of the consistent things you'll hear from these guys is, you know, that they are so deluded that they actually believe that the 7-year-old girl wanted it. You know, I mean, that's literally so. I think it's up to us to begin to define what we would consider to be a perpetrator, you know, and to me, a perpetrator is somebody who violates somebody else's sexuality in some way. And so for a girl, it's a non-consensual sexual experience, where if I'm a girl, it's some way that I have been violated. So I'll give you an example of how this plays out. We went to spring break to do some filming for this current documentary that we're working on. And what we saw was an entire culture down there of men who feel entitled to women's bodies. And they feel entitled to women's bodies because they have trained themselves through pornography, again, through the messages coming through in the culture, that this is what women want. That they want it, that, you know, that they're sexual objects, that they're available at all times. It's all the stories that are being told about women through these toxic, you know, vehicles like porn. So you have this culture of men down there who feel entitled to women's bodies. And we began to see this play out, where they would just grab, pull, I mean, without permission, without asking. We started asking girls, so what's it like being down here? They're like, man, you know, the guys just grab us and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And on and on. And so for me, I look at that situation and I go, every single one of those guys is a sexual perpetrator. But what we have done is we have normalized sexual assault and invasive, non-consensual sexual experiences to the point that we've actually made invisible the harm of it. And in some ways we've become what I call a rape culture, where it's you know, very difficult now for even people to wrap their minds around the idea of rape, you know, but no means no. If a girl didn't welcome that, she didn't give you permission, that is an invasive sexual experience. That is a violation of her dignity and her boundaries as a human being. And so, so for me, you know, I look at that and I see all these guys are sexual perpetrators. Well, how does that play out in the rest of the culture? You know, it's a problem far bigger and far deeper than we want to imagine.
Benji, when you watch Nefarious, it's brutal. Some of the things, some of the concepts you're covering. Yeah. You do it in a tasteful way. You're not
sensationalized.
You're not sensationalized, yeah. And it's eye-opening. But yet, it's hopeful. And that's a strange juxtaposition with the hope against such evil.
Yeah.
What hope do you see for the ending of human trafficking?
Yeah. I think, you know, for us it kind of boils down to what question are you trying to answer, you know? And if you're trying to answer the question of, well, why does human trafficking exist in our world today? It's a pretty dark picture that you have to paint and that we've just talked about. But when you talk about how do we restore somebody who has been affected by this trauma, I think that leads us to a far more hopeful picture, because the reality is that, you know, God is not a God to the people who just have it all together. He's not a God, you know, he didn't come for the saints, he came for the sinners, he came for the broken, he came for the least of these. In his very own mission statement, I mean, Jesus said, I came to set the captives free, to open prison doors, and to deliver all who are oppressed. And so really that is at the heart and the center of the heart of God and of the gospel. And so for us, when we think about, you know, the horror and the tragedy of what has happened to these women and children, we're just so grateful for a God who loves them right where they're at, who is jealous for them, and whose love can come and transform their lives. And we've seen it time and time again, where these deeply traumatized individuals have come into encounters with Jesus, where their lives have been completely transformed, where he's truly given them beauty for ashes, where he's truly given them, you know, the oil of gladness for the spirit of heaviness. And just that divine exchange is so powerful in their lives. And so that provides us with immense help. When we're fighting this battle, we feel like we're fighting on the winning side, and that we have the answer and we have a solution. Now, when you talk about the greater problem of human trafficking in the world, how do we bring an end to that? How will that end? The way that I feel like we have to look at it is twofold. First of all, Revelation 18 describes slavery at the very hour of Jesus' return to the earth. And so we know that we are in a war that will continue until the time of Christ's return. But the way that we look at it is also that we can win many battles between now and then, whether that's over one person's soul, or whether that's over one brothel, whether that's over one city or one nation. That there are battles, there are real souls to be fought for in the midst of this. And so I feel like for myself and for everybody who's viewing this, that we all have a part to play in making a difference in the life of one person. That to me is a victory. The Jewish Talmud says, he who saves one life saves the world entire. And so I think that's where we start. And, you know, the bigger problem, we leave in God's hands. You know, it is literally that big. And the good news is, he is going to bring an end to it. When Jesus comes back, his kingdom is going to triumph over every injustice, and his kingdom will be established in righteousness and justice. And of the increase of that government, there will be no end. So we're tremendously hopeful what God plans to do and what he is doing, and the part that he's given us to play in making a difference in real time and space in real people's lives today.
You're definitely doing so much to raise awareness for it, and I believe the Exodus Cry is one of those great vehicles to raise awareness and to help the abolition of these slaves. Can you tell us briefly why someone should visit the website and look into Exodus Cry?
Yeah, you know what we've tried to do at Exodus Cry is first and foremost, we've gone in the trenches, and we've really tried to get traction against this. And we feel like God has given us some very key strategies. So we fight human trafficking through prevention, intervention, and restoration. And people can read about that online. But the other thing we've tried to do is make this an accessible issue in terms of providing on-ramps for people to get involved, whether they're a housewife, a house mom, you know, to a school teacher, to a professional businessman, to a college student, to somebody who wants to give their entire life to this. We try to create those on-ramps. And so there's really 3 simple, practical ways that we provide that guidance for people laid out on our website. But they look like prayer, awareness, and giving. And 3 powerful components that anybody can participate in. And so we encourage people to check out our website and to get more information about how they can do that.
Benji, thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bless you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. God bless.
Make sure you check out www.exoduscry.com and get involved. You can click right here in the video for a link to a preview for Nefarious. And if you're on a mobile device, you can definitely also click in the description of the video. I want you guys to check this out and get involved so we can put an end to human trafficking.
They estimate that there's about 1 million children that are being exploited in the U.S. UNICEF estimates that every 30 seconds another child is sold in the world today. So there are vast numbers of children who are becoming victims of sexual violence in the world today. Again, we talked about the exploitation of vulnerability, and